Hello, everybody. This is Nick. You may know me as Man from Seoul. And here today, I have some friends of mine from GLITCH.COOL. Today, we're going to be talking a bit about ourselves and GLITCH.COOL as a whole. So, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves here?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Alex. I produce music under the name oddlogic.
Hey, my name is Boris. You also know me as Abroxis.
Hey, my name is Lucas. I produce under the moniker Nuan Sonar.
So, this is part of the Glitch exhibition that we're doing, Orbiting the Glitch. And this is to give people who are not already familiar with our project and what we do some more info about a little bit about who we are and then our group as a whole. So there's only four of us here. Glitch.cool has a number of people besides us, but we're here to talk to you today about a little bit about who we are as individuals, but then also how what we do fits into the group as a whole and what our group does. And hopefully we speak for everyone in the group and it gives you a good impression of what it is we do. So the people that are here, we're each going to tell you a bit about how we got into glitch music and art specifically. And then from that, we'll use that as a segue to tell you a bit about what our project is.
Yeah, so I think my entry point into the world of kind of like glitch music and IDM and stuff like that was through actually a mixtape that my sister gave me when I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old, maybe, that contained some Aphex Twin tracks. And at the time, I was not really interested in electronic music. I was mostly into like punk music, but something about the Aphex Twin tracks almost resonated with me on the punk level of like the kind of iconoclastic, like burn it down kind of angle. And so that was kind of my entry point into electronic music in general. Then I got really into Nine Inch Nails. And while I wouldn't describe Nine Inch Nails as glitch music, there are definitely kind of production elements of glitch music in it. And fast forwarding, I don't know how many years, 10 years or something, I used to run a label called Outlier Recordings, and through SoundCloud, I met Wolg a little over a decade ago now, I think. And I was just totally like blown away by his music. I remember thinking, how the hell does this guy make these sounds? Because at the time I was making mostly kind of like techno and hip hop oriented stuff. And so that sort of was my more direct on ramp onto like the specific kind of glitchy stuff that we're all kind of involved with today.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, that was nice. I guess for me, there was always some kind of an interesting glitch, just the way glitch sounds in itself. And something always drew me to it in any kind of genre that I was listening at the time. I guess, for example, even in drum and bass music, there were some tracks and artists that would slip in a little bit of glitchy effects and edits here and there. And I was always thinking, why is this not used more prominently in a track, for example? Why don't you make a whole track of that kind of a sound? And it was really about 3 or 4 years ago when I discovered Wook's music in Bandcamp. It was a tiny known album. And I realized that, wow, I think it was the Vortex folding in that I was listening to. And I realized that this is exactly the type of thing that I was looking for. And at about the same time, I also discovered Vatex, which is Rob's other alias. And it was, again, exactly the thing I was looking for. And it was pretty crazy ever since that happened, my own involvement in production increased drastically, especially around the community that we built. And I'm really grateful about that. It's something I didn't expect to do, because it was just one evening when I was listening to this album, and then I thought, wow, exactly what Alex said. How does this guy make these sounds? And how is it even possible? And I discovered that he had his own Discord server, and this is where I met everybody. Actually, I didn't know anybody before that point, and it all began in that server. I think it's pretty safe to say that's how it all started. And in those 4 years, obviously my interest in not just listening, but making this type of hyper-edited and detailed music increased, and has only kept increasing since then. But it's funny because I always kind of knew that this is what I want to listen to, but I could never find it. Obviously, this music existed for 10 years before I ever really heard it, and it has been there all along. I don't know how I missed it for so long, but it's better to find it late than never, I guess. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you for listening.
All right, so I guess a brief history of Nuan Sonar. So I started listening to electronic music freshman year of high school. I was big into like Skrillex and dubstep and stuff. Kind of a little bit less IDM stuff. But then a friend of mine actually showed me Window Liquor by Aphex Twin, and I still think that's one of the greatest songs ever made. It's just incredible, super influential to me. And right around that time, I also started getting into Edit a lot too. One of the members of Glitch Mob, and Glitch Mob's Drink the Sea was also like an incredibly influential album for me too. So I think just kind of combining those influences of, you know, right around my formative years with like music production experience really kind of like cemented that sort of aesthetic decision that I think is really important to me. After that, I kind of got started with drum and bass a lot. I really enjoy drum and bass kind of sound design. So I'd say I'd probably orbit like glitch and neuro kind of appreciation in my past history and stuff like that. But how I got onto GLITCH.COOL specifically, I was classmates with a friend of mine named Ben who goes by Hlesi in GLITCH.COOL as well. And he was saying, I think he was actually involved in Wolg's Discord, and he was like, yeah, a bunch of us are kind of getting together to make a sample pack. We should hop in on it. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That sounds like fun. And lo and behold, it was a lot of fun, and I met some very amazing and talented people. So I guess that's sort of my backstory.
Thank you, Lucas. And my story is pretty similar to Lucas's. Actually, in the beginning, I started listening to electronic music when I was in high school, and I really liked it. And it took me a while to realize what I liked so much about a lot of electronic music was the manipulation of sound design and texture that you don't get as much of in more traditional non-electronic styles of music. And I kind of started taking that more and more to its logical conclusion. I mean, you know, I started listening to the typical Skrillex, bro step kind of stuff. And then I was looking for stuff that would go further and further and further into exploring sound as like a textural element, as with texture forward, as like the really important part of the music. And I eventually stumbled upon some Woolg, as I'm sure pretty much all of us here have. And that was kind of like a pretty defining moment for me. I was like, yeah, again, like, whoa, like how the hell does this guy make these kind of sounds? And I didn't, it was hard for me to find other music that would scratch that same itch. Like I found a little, but not like a lot of it. And then I started talking to Woolg over the internet. I think we started talking on like Facebook or something. And he got me into his Discord server. And by that point, had found more and more music that I liked. You know, I heard Vatex's Libet tones. I'd been finding some other stuff here and there, but there wasn't really like a central, you know, community, at least that I knew of, that was making this kind of music. And then joining that Discord server is where I met the people here in this, not only in this call, but like pretty much everyone in the, you know, glitch.cool group in general. And it was kind of nice to finally find, you know, more than like one other person at a time who actually likes this kind of music, and then not only who likes it, but makes it. I had been making music myself for a couple of years at that point, and I was mostly making like not so good bass music and then like kind of down tempo stuff. But I knew that I really liked doing sound design. I was just kind of like not having a lot of success taking it completely to the next level. I had actually released an EP on Alex's label Outlier, and that kind of, I think, helped get me into that kind of scene even further, because I was definitely like into glitch stuff, but that was kind of like me kind of sort of breaking into it. And then finally, you know, finding a community of other people who also make that kind of music was, you know, really cemented my desire to continue making that style of music and appreciating it. And well, that's exactly what we're doing here today. I think it's safe to say that for all of us, this is definitely a thing that has been a wild success so far, and we hope it continues to grow. So what I want to do, now that you know a little bit about the individuals here on this call, I want to give a brief history of GLITCH.COOL as a group, which is more than just us here. There's a number of other of us too. So here's like a brief, rough timeline of how things worked out. So we all met in the Woolg Discord server, and so this was a server to hang out with Greg, who goes by the artist name Woolg, and we all joined at different points, but we all were hanging out in there. And then mid 2019, March 11, 2019 specifically, I had the idea of doing a sample pack. Now, I had always wanted to do a sample pack just for the hell of it. It seemed like a fun thing to do, a good way to practice sound design. But I figured, I know all these cool people who also have like incredible sound design skills in this Discord server. Why don't I ask them if they want to contribute some samples to it too? We can make it like a little community group thing. And that ended up being the Glitch with Friends 1 sample pack that came out in 2019. And so that was kind of the genesis of this. I definitely did not intend to like start a big thing like this. It was just like a little project I wanted to do and get some help from some friends, and it just kind of like escalated. We got like a gajillion downloads on Reddit and stuff, and we figured like, hey, like there's like a demand for this kind of stuff. People want this, and we kept going. So we had decided originally to make a compilation of tracks out of the sample pack, and we decided to actually go through with that a couple months later. Once we realized the sample pack was very popular. So Glitch with Friends compilation volume 1 came out at a later point, and that was every song on there is made entirely from the sounds in the Glitch with Friends sample pack, which a lot of people don't know that. I think a lot of people don't realize that that's where those sounds come from. But the fact that we were able to make such like different sounding songs from the same source sounds, I think really speaks to the creativity of the group. So that came out, and then we decided in August 24th, 2019, which I believe was before Glitch with Friends compilation came out, to make our own little Discord server for coordinating our projects separate from the Woolg server, because we were kind of clogging up a lot of his channels with like our coordinating our projects, which he was happy to see that we were doing it. He's been supportive from day one. He's one of our members. And so, but it was it was starting to go beyond the scope of what that server was for. So we made our own server to coordinate our own projects. And then at some point, specifically February 3rd, 2020, we decided to open that server up to the public so we could start building a public-facing community, similar to what Woolg had been doing. And there's a big overlap between the two people. If you make a Venn diagram between Glitch.COOL appreciators and Woolg appreciators, it's like almost a circle. So like it's not like we're really innovating something completely new here. It was the community was largely the same, but it was good now to have a dedicated space, not only for us to coordinate our projects, but also to build up this community that is, currently thriving. So after that, our next big project was Glitch with Friends Samples Volume 2. And same methodology, we assembled a sample pack, and then after that, later down the line, we made a compilation, Glitch with Friends Compilation Volume 2. But in between that, we decided to do some other new projects too that we hadn't done before. And we're a bit of a risk because we hadn't pulled anything like this off before, but it ended up working. The notable projects include Glitch Fest. Glitch.Fest was the first one, which was a virtual festival we held over Twitch. This was during the height of the pandemic lockdown in 2020. And so, we had talked about doing an in-person festival at some point in the future, but the pandemic kind of foreclosed that possibility, even if logistically it would have been really difficult anyway. But we figured, hey, we can definitely do this over Twitch. And it was starting to become like all the rage anyway, because, everyone else is doing it too. We had a lot of listeners. People really enjoyed it. And we got to showcase a lot of extremely cool glitch music that not only we make, but that, exists in other corners of the internet that people might not have known about. So we were able to bring a lot of really cool music to the spotlight. At a point after that, we decided to launch our own label. A lot of us have had pretty not so good experiences with labels over the years. Some good, some bad. But the problem with small labels is that it's really hard to get a label that pays attention and really does their due diligence, while at the same time having the level of reach that is, nice for a new artist to get earlier on in their career. So we decided to, rather than have to, trust our music to other people, why not make our own label? And we did. And the first release that we released was the Glitch with Friends compilation volume 2, which has, I believe, 9 tracks from all of us, or from most of us, I should say. And then the label has been continually putting out music from our core group since then. We've had a number of releases now, and we have a huge schedule of releases coming up on it. So keep your ears peeled for that. And then now what we have going on is the Orbiting the Glitch exhibition, and then we have a surprise event at the end of that. So those are our current projects, and we hope to have many projects going on in the future. Now that there's you have a brief history of GLITCH.COOL as a group, I kind of wanted to open this panel up to our, it's less of a panel, more of a discussion internet call, but I want to open it up to my pals here, and we just are going to talk a little bit about what it exactly is that we do on a more kind of conceptual level, and what our aims are, and what we hope to see for GLITCH.COOL in the future. And so I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to ask you guys kind of what you think our sort of core operating principles are, and where you see that taking us in the future. Take it away, guys.
Yeah, so actually, really quick before I touch on that, I do want to just bring up one other point of the kind of brief history of GLITCH.COOL that I think is kind of amusing.
Please do.
But it's the genesis of the name itself, GLITCH.COOL. So, Nick, you kind of alluded to how the first sample pack, we didn't really have many expectations behind it. We just kind of wanted to make it for fun and put it out there for free, and whatever happened. And it ended up gaining a lot of traction on Reddit. At the time, the only way we were distributing it was via a public Google Drive download link. And then Google ended up suspending downloads from it because it generated too much traffic. So I'm a software engineer by trade, and I quickly rushed to spin up a web page for it where we could distribute a torrent. That way it couldn't get shut down. And I whipped up this web page in like a day, and I was looking for domains to buy for it. And of course, the obvious kind of top level domains like glitch.com is taking glitch.net, et cetera, et cetera. So I was looking at the more exotic domains. I remember some options included glitch.ninja, glitch.taxi, glitch.zone, a number of other kind of amusing and strange ones, but one of them was glitch.cool, which I thought was sort of funny, and apparently a majority of the members at the time agreed, and so that's where the name comes from. Is just it's just the domain name. So I always think that's kind of a funny little anecdote. But to your actual question though about like our core operating principles, I actually this morning went and looked up the first post that I ever wrote on the glitch.cool site, which is kind of I would not call it a manifesto, but it's me blathering on about what I hope it could be or should be or whatever. And it's sort of amusing to see how the initial idea squares with the reality today, mostly consistent, I think. But a big part of, at least personally, what I wanted to do, my background, nowadays I work as a software engineer, but for the majority of my kind of adult working life, I worked for a music publisher in Manhattan, and I used to run a label called Outlier Recordings. And so primarily my background is kind of music industry, and I kind of grew to really dislike conventional record labels and the kind of like top-down structure that they sort of take on, which in my experience usually leaves the artist in a sort of less advantageous position than the label. So personally, my inspiration or idea for what this project could become was basically to be like an anti-record label. And what I mean by that is like a record label without having to be a record label. So like a kind of a network of that could offer like promotional support and any kind of support really to its members, but in a kind of flattened or more decentralized manner where it's not like this guy owns the label, this guy, decides what the marketing or the messaging or whatever is, to kind of spread the responsibilities out and essentially run something akin to a record label, but in a much more collective manner. And at the time, I was also very inspired by just the concept of hacker spaces, which are generally community owned and operated. So for me personally, those have always been kind of big underpinnings to like how I view glitch.cool, what its purpose is, how it should operate is sort of democratically and in a manner where everybody has input and can kind of ultimately steer the ship. The beautiful thing about it, though, and the reason why I keep saying this is how I think about it, is that ultimately no single person is really in control of it. I'm curious to hear what everybody else has to say, because I'm sure we all have sort of, overlapping but yet different ideas about sort of what it actually is.
Thank you for that, Alex. Yeah, definitely. I think that in terms of being able to act as a decentralized anti-label, so far our label effort is definitely doing that. No one person necessarily like owns it. I gotta give a shout out to Nacho for running a lot of the administrative portion of it.
Oh yeah,
Nacho goes
May's
by
contribution to that is huge for sure.
He's shout out to May. But yeah, I want to hear more about Boris and Lucas, how you guys conceive of glitch.cool, like what purpose you see it meeting and what you kind of hope to see for it for the future. Let's see what you guys think.
Sure. Yeah, so I'd say glitch.cool, the thing that really is interesting about glitch.cool to me is just how just a wide breadth of people that we get intermingling throughout the server. I think one of our most important distinctions regarding glitch.cool is we often use the phrase like orbiting glitch, because I think like we all pull from like vast backgrounds of just different experience levels and comfort levels, like musically. I guess like music is definitely my main focus, just because that's what really like I'm most passionate about. But the great thing about the site and the Discord is just we can really just kind of do whatever with it, which kind of sounds like might lead to some analysis paralysis, but for the most part, everyone just kind of comes together and collaborates upon like passion first and foremost. And I think another thing that's really sweet about just the whole collective is how focused we are at creation, just any aspect of creation. Like we want to teach creation, we want to actually create, we want to like showcase the process and stuff. Like we had like the feedback streams and stuff for I think almost a year at one point, I think when Wolg stopped doing it. And I think that was really great for building a community and also just kind of like setting a tone that everyone can kind of like abide by in a sense. Just everyone's kind of working towards making the best art that they possibly can. And I find that to be a really, really inspiring space to be a part of. So
thank you. Yeah, that was very good. I guess one thing that we can mention is that at the very first moment when we created GLITCH.COOL, which was, I don't think it was even a moment, it was more like a happening, something that just happened across the span of a short time. And we didn't really imagine everything that it is today, I think. At least maybe some of us did imagine certain parts, as you guys already said. Perhaps people have a different vision of what this is or what they want it to be. But I think none of us really had a clear vision. We had a certain goal in mind. We started with a sample pack, as mentioned previously. And then we needed a website for it. A website which I think deserves its own swat of into the discussion, since Alex really made it. It's just exceptional if you think about when it first came out and what it was and how far it went, what it became. I think this is something that just kind of happens as we go. And at one point, you just stop and think about it and look backwards, and you see so much of this that has progressed and happened. For example, I didn't really think about this, but recently I realized that we have almost 1,000 members in the Discord. I don't think we expected that when we started. Maybe we hoped for it, but now it's pretty much about to happen anytime now, since it's just a few people until we hit 1,000. But I guess looking at the future, in the same way that we couldn't predict things at the start, it's hard to predict them even now. And I think that opportunities just arise at some moment in time. And if we have the chance, we try to take these opportunities. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about this whole collective. Since when I started making music, it was really lonely for me, to be honest. Discord wasn't invented back then. um, it's again one of those things that just popped up at some point in time, and now they're a part of life. But it's really hard to appreciate the power of Discord, precisely in giving you the tools to build a community. Before that, we had forums and mostly message boards, just good old classic forums, and maybe some YouTube people, but not as many as now, for sure. So it was really kind of an isolated experience for me. And one thing that I will always believe and feel is that GLITCH.COOL is a community for me. um, we live in a society, and it's in this case a society that has become a part of my life, and I will always look at it as a society community, and a place where I can meet and continue meeting new people. And it's something that pushed me like nothing else ever did. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure that some people are more than fine just doing their own thing, but for me, that this public side to it, this networking element is important for sure. And yeah, that's one of the things I want to see grow for sure. Just seeing the community keep growing and growing. And as that happens, I'm absolutely confident that we'll keep coming up with new challenges for us and new events to organize or projects to complete. And I also feel that we'll increase the community involvement as well, which has definitely been on our plate for a long time now, and we've already done some things there. But I think it would be good to even do more there, and it's just something that we want to be careful with, since I'm sure not just for me but for everybody else, it is a valuable community, and we want to handle it in the proper way. Yeah, I think I'll stop for now and pass the ball to somebody else.
Actually, I want to take off right where you left off, and so I think that you've identified kind of the secret sauce to a mixed glitch.cool, kind of an effective project that kind of keeps going and keeps having cool things happening. Is that this isn't a project that it had like a start point, but there wasn't like a one thing we wanted to do that kind of just like was going to be the terminus of our effort, but rather, you know, there's continually new things happening, and these things are all kind of just like emergently arising, like in a very organic sense, out of just like us being continually inspired by the things that each one of the rest of us does. And we have our like internal crew that is glitch.cool, but then our, as you mentioned, our community that like orbits us is almost 1,000 people. We obviously get inspired by all the other members in our core group to a very heavy extent, but then the people in our community, they're very much like inspire us to do things as well. Like I think a lot of our good ideas come from kind of like seeing what things people are into, like why they're into them, what kind of art people are making that is like not like people who aren't us, but make stuff that's similar to us. Like, who are they? What are they making? Like, how is it different from ours? Like, what cool ways are they taking ideas that either we thought of or that are integral to what we do and doing something very different than what we do with those ideas? And I think that like, as much as there's like, we're all orbiting the glitch in this sense, like this whole like glitch aesthetic, glitch music, glitch art, and glitch art is something I think we should talk about a bit also, because a lot of us focus on music, but like there's a very much a visual component to a lot of what goes on here. But it's very much like a process of like mutual inspiration. Like, given that we're like the core group here, we definitely have like a lot of like power and say in this like little micro niche here. But I think a lot of people in our community, especially like longtime participants, don't realize the extent that they have a huge influence on us, even if it's not so like obvious on the surface. And so as this like style proliferates and gets bigger and gets more popular, a lot of people who have been involved who will have like always have invisible marks on it. Like there's never going to be like, you won't be able to like listen to music 20 years from now that originated from like this point in time and say for sure like, oh yeah, I can hear like every little bit of like this person in here. Like you maybe, unless someone was like huge and influential, you're probably not going to. But the matter of the fact is that like all of us, not only in our core group but like this whole community, are having some either direct or indirect effect on the trajectory of this entire aesthetic style. And I think that's a really important dynamic that gets kind of erased with like the traditional label model. But with the way that we do everything, I think that we, even if we're not always consciously aware of that process unfolding itself, it's something that we've leaned heavily into, and we try to cultivate as much of that kind of like organic process as we can. And I think that's, not to pat our own backs too hard here, but I think that's what makes us a little special. But I want to, Alex, I know you're itching to say something, so I'll hand it off to you here.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out that actually is a kind of an interesting development of this whole project. That the way that I was speaking about it was mostly kind of from the perspective of the mid 2019, whenever exactly we started. That was sort of my perspective on it then. But what I think has been really kind of rewarding to see is the extent to which this has become a community-oriented endeavor beyond just us kind of running our own sort of quasi-label or doing whatever projects for our own interests artistically. I would say at this point, that's actually the minority of GLITCH.COOL. I would say the majority of the big picture at this point is more to do with not just what we're doing individually, but what our broader community is doing and how we're kind of how all of it fits together. And initially, I really wasn't contemplating that at all. I was just thinking like, how can we form a kind of collective that helps its own members? But I think at this point, and I think actually it's probably not a coincidence that right around the time we made the server public was right around the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And I think that it really kind of helped gel this community together. And it's been really cool to kind of see the evolution of the project from being this more insular thing into this more open kind of community-driven endeavor.
I think you mean to say it's glitch.cool to see it do that.
It is, yes, it is glitch.cool.
Yeah. And so now that we're talking a bit about like this whole thing, like this entire community and our group as a whole and the broader scene in which we exist, maybe we should talk a bit about, what we see happening in this kind of like aesthetic realm. So the type of music that a lot of us have started to make is a label that we've begun. By label, I mean like a descriptive label, not a music label, but like a descriptive label, a genre name that we're calling hyperglitch. Now, hyperglitch is definitely not something that glitch.cool like owns or has like control over, but it's definitely an aesthetic style that's kind of that we're very invested in promulgating and that we're very invested in popularizing. And so I was thinking, like, even though it's not like ours per se, like it's probably like as much of an invention of like maybe like Rob Cluth or like Woolg in a way, like maybe we can kind of talk a bit about like that genre specifically and then how it ties into like visual art and in other ways too. So I kind of want to hear like what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Sure. So I don't know. I like the way that I remember in the kind of early discussion about, should we kind of create a name for this style that seems to be kind of emerging out of this community. And there was a lot of discussion about what to call it specifically. And then hyperglitch was kind of thrown out there. And I remember thinking, at first, actually, I remember thinking, oh, I don't like it because it sounds, at face value, it sounds like you're talking almost quantitatively, like it's glitch but more. And then so I wasn't really a fan of that because I thought then it's like this weird measuring stick thing where it's like, is this hyper glitch? Is this glitch enough to be hyper glitch and so on? But then I thought about it more, and I'm a big fan of this computer scientist Ted Nelson, who is a little bit of a crackpot, but like the endearing kind of crackpot. And he actually, I believe, is the guy who invented the term hypertext, as in like HTTP. And I was reading some of his writings about hypertext, like, and I think this actually maybe predates hypertext actually being a living, breathing thing, but just him like thinking about it. And he was describing it as being not hyper in a quantitative sense, but hyper in terms of more in a mathematical sense of generality or extensibility of like something bearing many dimensions. And he talked about compared, a simple page of a book to this hypothetical hypertext model, which he was representing in terms of graphs, like mathematical graphs, nodes, and so on. And I found that very interesting. And so I kind of remember having a conversation where I was sharing these Ted Nelson notes with people. And so since then, I've sort of had that in mind whenever I think of hyperglitch, which is to say that, for me anyway, I don't think of it as being glitch, but more. I think of it as being aesthetic trappings of what people commonly call glitch, but sort of like interconnected with other elements of what broadly people call new media art. And so that, I think, also is very important to the glitch.cool, the universe of glitch.cool. It's not just music, it's generative art, it's data bending, it's all these kind of glitchy, computery art processes. And so to me, hyperglitch has more to do with the general realm of exploring those kinds of ideas than it has to do with a particular sound or a particular technique, which is very vague. But to me, I think that's actually part of the power of it. I think that while artistic people often say that limitations can breed a lot of ideas, that's definitely true. But at the same time, I think there's a danger in shoehorning yourself. So personally, to me anyway, my personal interpretation of hyperglitch is deliberately open-ended in that kind of Ted Nelson hypertext kind of way. Yeah.
I think you really touched on a lot of the important points there. I think that the common aesthetic that exists between like the kind of the musical end of what a lot of our members do, and then the visual end, which is kind of the other side of it, is very much this focus on like using. I know you said there's no specific tool, but like there's like a mentality of like using tools for the wrong purpose, because like we kind of see this, like there isn't an inherent right way to do a lot of art. It's whatever gets us the results we want. And it's really celebrating a lot of kind of failure, for lack of a better word, like things that don't look right or things that might be unusable in a more like traditional context, like repurposing them. If you look at a lot of the glitch art that a lot of our members do, and Vaprism, so he goes, his name is Jay, but his artist name is Vaprism. He did a workshop recently for this exhibition on how to do a lot of glitch art techniques for visuals. And it's pretty obvious, like a couple seconds into it, it's not your traditional like style of making visual art. You're not like your typical like paint and canvas situation. And I think a lot of us approach music the same way too. It's taking a lot of plugins and processes and just like totally turning them on their head, and then getting sounds out of them that would sound kind of gross in any other context, but we're like reworking them in a way that is really satisfying from both like a textural and like rhythmic and like sometimes even like melodic and harmonic standpoint. And I think that both Lucas and Boris here are like capable of taking those techniques, like using a similar mentality and like taking them in wildly different like directions musically. And I was kind of hoping you guys could talk a little bit about that and how you guys see yourselves in like your music and your art within that broader context.
Sure. Do you want me to go first, Boris, or you wanna hit it?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, cool. Lots to touch on there. So I want to run back to a point that oddlogic was making regarding kind of discerning where hyperglitch kind of came from and that sort of thing. I remembered it distinctly being kind of started in Wolg's Discord. He had a genre ideas and development like channel, and I remember there was a lot of really great discussion that took place there, and that's definitely like, or as a direct result of that was sort of the ethos and sort of manifest of GLITCH.COOL. But as far as hyperglitch is concerned, for me personally, I always thought that it was sort of akin to what like hyperpop is to pop. You got artists on the PC music label like Sophie, Arca, stuff like that. That music has been like super inspirational for, say, basically everybody on the server. We really vibe with it. And I think taking the idea of like what makes hyperpop akin to like regular pop, hyperglitch is very similar. It's just kind of taking glitch techniques, glitch processing, textures, timbres, and then just cranking it up to like 200% and just trying to really just get the most out of anything that we possibly can. And I think that in as well as just kind of combining many elements from different genres as well plays a huge part into what makes hyperglitch like really so special. And Nick, you mentioned something before. I totally forgot what point did you mention before?
I guess like how exactly because one thing that I find really interesting, like if we're talking about like if I'm contrasting like your music as Nuan Sonar to maybe like Boris's music as Abroxis, your guys' music sounds really freaking different from each other. However, like I think you guys use a lot of the same kind of like approach and methodology, and I like from a personal level, I find that extremely interesting. Like, I mean, I know you guys well. I know how you make your music and stuff, but like for the audience, I think it'd be nice for them to know a little bit about like what how you guys approach a bit of the music making process with respect to this kind of hyperglitch mentality, and that way people can kind of see what not only you two have in common with each other, but maybe what like all of us have in common from a production standpoint, and that manifests in such like different styles of music between all of us.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So I think probably the biggest and most like intoxicating part of making hyperglitch kind of music to me is like texture. It's got a very unique kind of feel and texture compared to like most other music really out there commercially available. And I think that being sort of the primary focus for me personally is definitely up there. Like I love working with like Foley and stuff like that, trying to just mangle really like heavily processed sounds to create like this almost like large or heavily unprocessed sounds, making them heavily processed to create like this larger than life sort of like texture and sort of feel to all the instruments and stuff that I like playing. I'm a big rhythm guy as well, so I'd say probably texture and rhythm are probably my two favorite things to kind of manipulate when working on music. But I've also come from like a melodic background. Like I played piano since I was like 8 years old. I played guitar since I was like 15. I want to get into drums. I want to get like an actual drum set soon. But I've always kind of had that being sort of a part of me and my influences as well. So I think that definitely leads towards more like melodic kind of tracks. But I also really like hyperglitch and the textures that are available there. So I think a lot of my creations have been trying to blend that almost atonality of like traditional glitch with that more melodic aspect of something like, I don't know, drum and bass or hip hop or something like that. So I guess that's kind of my driving ethos as far as how I make music.
What about you, Boris?
Yeah, that's really a really interesting topic to cover. And I also find it really fascinating that all of us have this different background and really hugely varying levels of experience between us. Some have done music for a decade, others for a couple of years, and so on. And to kind of bounce back to hyperglitch a little bit before I continue with this, um, I think this it's important to mention that obviously all of us have probably little differences in how we perceive this, um, even as a word itself. Um, is it is it a genre? Is it a philosophy or some set of uh, ideals or I don't know practices? And I think it's a little bit of all of that in itself. Um, I suppose it's true for most of us that we first experience this as others have mentioned, with artists like Wook and Vatex. But the community itself, I think, has given this whole concept a new life and kind of started expanding it in its own way. And I think it's important to mention that at some point Greg Wook decided to close down his server and redirect everything to our server. And I think that was because the vision of our community is pretty much identical to what his vision was, and it was a vision to kind of create a wave of this type of music. At that point in time, I think that we didn't even have a word for it yet. We just had our server. It was still kind of fresh and didn't have that many people. But even before coming up with the word, I think we had a sense of this whole thing in our own way. And since that moment, a lot of time has passed already. And one of the biggest things for me, one of the most interesting thing, is seeing how the artists in this community, both in the core member team and the public part of the community, uh, have evolved, and how their styles kind of changed when or after being exposed to these hyperglitch practices or methods of making music, or however you want to call it. I think for me personally, I was always kind of stuck with sounds ever since I started producing, which was over a decade ago. I think in total it's probably like 13 or 14 years, but I don't even count the first few years as anything. And I would be using samples in a pretty straightforward way. Sometimes I would just slap a sample from some pack, and it would be the actual basis of my track. I wouldn't do much to change it. I just start working around it, and I think I had a very limited uh, kind of understanding of how I can um, work with sound. Just something as simple as the general approach towards working with sound. And looking at the people in this community and also the streams of Wook when he's producing and showing things and so on has kind of given me a new way to look at producing in itself. The whole core idea of breaking sounds down, for example, and how to actually create a sound that can count as a glitch or um, some kind of sonic failure. I don't know how to call it, but we all know how where glitch comes from and the original idea. And so these approaches to creating such sounds have given me a new way to make music in general. And this music doesn't necessarily become hyperglitch by following these methods, which I think is super interesting. And one of the reasons why we all kind of learned similar techniques and started following similar approaches to creating sounds, but all of us end up with such different styles and sounding tracks. And that's the part where I think I would say is that hyperglitch is just kind of in between defined and undefined, and this undefined part is precisely the future and how people are going to apply these techniques. And for example, a genre like drum and bass has a very consistent template to it. Um, it it was a genre I listened to for at least a decade. I was crazy about it, and I'm not trying to make it sound like it's better or worse in any way, but it's just a matter of fact that you can easily recognize the drum and bass breaks and patterns and energy. But in hyperglitch, you can have no structure at all. Like the percussive elements or the beat structure could be completely missing. You can just throw a bunch of different sounds and effects and just keep editing and arranging that, and you come to a completely new structure. And sometimes that's how I make music, in fact. But I easily get lost in such complex structures. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think there's a template or some kind of a pattern that we can say applies for happy glitch. And this just kind of gives it this level of freedom that some other uh, electronic dance types of music don't really have. I mean, they're kind of stuck in their basic form, and you get many subgenres and stuff like that. But you just know what to expect. And with hyperglitch, I don't know what to expect. Like if Wook is making a new album, or if some of you guys or people in the server are about to release music, there is nothing in my mind that I can say, oh yeah, it's probably gonna sound a bit like that or a bit like this. I just have no idea. And I remember when Soup's Hyperglitch series EP came out. Well, actually, before that, since I know that she sent most of those tracks to track review streams, so I heard them at that point before the official release. And that's an example for a type of hyperglitch which I didn't expect. It was super fresh to me when I first heard it. And it's just one little example. This has happened with many others. And every following time in the future, when a release is coming from some of these people, I'm excited in that same way. Kind of like when I was excited to first start listening to this genre or this type of music in general. And that's amazing to me that I still get this feeling. I'm still super excited about it. I still feel fresh about it after years of listening to it, and I still don't know what to expect from it. It's probably my favorite part of it, and I don't know what to expect from my own music production. I have no idea, and that's probably one of the biggest factors that keeps me going and keeps things interesting.
I think that's kind of
Yeah.
like, I agree with that so hard. I feel like that's one of my favorite aspects is how much diversity in the genre you get. But one thing that I'm, as I look into the future, a prospect that really excites me is like, because right now most people who label their music as hyperglitch, we know who they are. Like, we've met them before. Like, they're people generally in our orbit, or like we're relatively familiar with them to some degree or another. I'm really looking forward to like seeing more people like release hyperglitch music, like people we've never heard of before, people we've like never met, or like people who like may not even necessarily know about us. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I'm pretty excited about. Like, and that's going to be like some interesting stuff, like where it's like it's a completely organic thing for them, and they all the like think about when like loads of people started making dubstep who had like never been to Croydon, London, UK. Like, they'd never been to all the like the OG dubstep spots, or like known any of those people, but they were starting to like make their own twist on it. Now, I know a lot of the old heads didn't like that, but like you can't deny that you got some serious innovation in that genre when it took off and people started just running with it. I'm stoked to see when we have a genre here that's like based off already off like based on innovating and using things the wrong way, and not limiting yourself too much to convention, and specifically using things kind of the wrong way. like imagine when people like run with that even further than we can currently imagine it. Imagine what that's going to sound like. You can't imagine it. At least I can't. It's gonna be tight though.
Yeah, I think that Boris, you put it very well when you said it kind of exists at the boundary between like defined and undefined, and I feel like that's part of the beauty of this whole thing that we're describing is that it's deliberately not one thing, which makes it confusing and difficult to describe on the one hand, but on the other hand, I agree with you, Nick. I very much look forward to other people taking this ill-defined on purpose idea and then molding it into something else. And I think that that's not an aberration or a mistake. Like that is actually the point. I think like I remember in the way back in the old Wolg Discord server days, I remember him saying the reason why he thinks that it's necessary to come up with some term to describe this music that a lot of us are making is that the old terminology no longer is meaningful because basically the genre trappings of like what people when they think of glitch now, it's like either they're thinking of like I don't know like Alva Nodo or something like that kind of like super high frequency IDM kind of stuff, or they're thinking of whatever, but it maybe isn't actually meaningfully descriptive of these kind of new emerging things. So what I'm getting at ultimately is I think that in my mind personally, I hope to see people extrapolate on the hyperglitch thing until that becomes unrecognizable, and then that gives birth to some entirely new thing. And I feel like going back to the why I liked Aphex Twin as a 12-year-old because I was into iconoclastic punk stuff, it's like I do think that it is the job of artists to destroy the genre conventions and then create new ones, and then it's like a never-ending cycle. But I don't view that as like a Sisyphusian like rolling the boulder up the hill thing. I view that as like an inevitable part of the creative process that I look forward to people destroying what we've built, you know, in a way. How very glitch, you know.
I don't think I could have said it any better myself. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, I completely agree. No, I didn't want to cut you off or anything.
I had nothing to say. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, the whole concept of glitch is just really like kind of taking the broken bits and kind of repurposing them in a way that is like aesthetically beautiful or interesting, you know. And I think kind of like the hyperglitch being like sort of pushing the boundaries of even that is just super exciting to be a part of. And it's wild, like Boris mentioned, just kind of community interaction, community posting and sharing of artwork, everything, and just even like just kind of the short time we've kind of been up and running, like I noticed such drastic increases in quality by just regular posters and people who kind of wander in maybe or just want to like say, hey, like, you know, how do you do this? How do you glitch this in a weird and interesting way? And then people kind of collaborate in audio production or visual production, and you get these like amazingly organic results that I don't think would be sort of done really any other way. You know, there's not any way to just like Google like how do I glitch? You know, like it's almost esoteric in terms of its implementation, and I think everyone draws from their own background and history of it and what glitch sort of speaks to them, and then you just combine this in this giant melting pot, and you get like just fascinating and inspiring results. Like every day I'm checking the Discord or the website or really anything, and then just, you know, just being inspired by it. I think it's really cool.
I think that's probably a perfect place to end off here. I think that this probably gives you all a pretty good understanding of, you know, a bit about who we are and what we do and what we want to see happen. And so, I mean, after all, this is all about, you know, our community. This is maybe didn't start off that way, but like it has, you know, come to be that. And you know, as much as we do our art for our own fulfillment, you know, we do it because we know that we have a broader community here that, you know, as much as we feed into it, it feeds right back into us. It's a, you know, it's a good back and forth. And so yeah, I want to thank the three of you for joining me on this and for discussing all this with me. I want to thank you, the audience, for listening. This is going to be published during the middle of the Orbiting the Glitch exhibition. And so that's go if you're listening to this and haven't seen the exhibition, I'm not sure how you found this, but if for some reason you're in that boat, go check out the exhibition. Yeah, go.
Please do.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, it's tight. It's sick. Like, shout out to Raf. She did a great job curating all that and putting that all together. It blew my mind when I first saw it.
And organizing it and just planning all this shit.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was a team effort, but like far and away, Raf did like the vast majority of it, like, and easily. And then, stay tuned for the, we have, I think the last event that we have for the exhibition is the secret event at the end. Was there another thing, or was that it?
I have another secret, but obviously I can't say what it is because.
Okay, tell me the secret later, Alex. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, the audience, you'll just have to wait and find out what all our top secrets are. You'll know eventually. So, yeah. Thank you for listening, and hope you all have a good day.